Dragon Ball, a series that has cemented itself in the annals of history as one of the greatest anime and just shows of all time, be in part due to its crazy power system, the transformations, the screaming, the everything, but of course, one of the concepts that kind of goes underappreciated despite it being the title of the show is the Dragon Balls. Now, of course, it's kind of a meme in modern day about the lack of consequences in Dragon Ball, because if anyone dies, they can just be brought back to life with the Dragon Balls. And throughout the many years of consuming Dragon Ball, as well as different videos and channels that have covered different what-if scenarios on Dragon Ball, such as, what if Raditz survived? What if Goku went Super Saiyan? What if Frieza turned good? But one what-if that I've never really seen covered is the concept of, what if the Dragon Balls couldn't bring people back to life? Now, this is a concept I kind of thought of late in the night as I come up with my different sort of ideas for YouTube videos. And as I started going down the rabbit hole of, yeah, what if the Dragon Balls just couldn't wish people back to life? What if there was actual consequences to dying? And well, over the course of the last couple days, I've pretty much written an entire essay on the topic, a 4,000 word, 7-page paper, pretty much, detailing the events of Dragon Ball if the Dragon Balls couldn't bring people back to life. This is easily the most amount of effort that I've ever put into writing a paper, and it's not even for a school project. Now, I know what you're thinking right away, is that if the Dragon Balls couldn't bring people back to life, wouldn't the story end fairly soon? Probably the Saiyan Saga, where everyone dies for the most part. For the sake of this what if, I have taken certain liberties with the lore, and of course I'm writing this what if, knowing the entire context and story of Dragon Ball, you know, from OG Dragon Ball to Z and Super. In some cases, I've taken certain concepts that may not have been introduced until a lot later in the story and brought them into it sooner. We'll get more on that as we go deeper into this story. Pretty much the entire story of the first bit of Dragon Ball would go the same, all the way up to the post-Red Ribbon Army arc when Goku finally gets the last Dragon Ball and fulfills his promise to Upa and brings his father Bora back to life. The first time anybody is ever revived with the Dragon Balls. So we jump forward to that moment when Shenron is summoned and Goku asks the wish to bring Bora back to life. Now, of course, in the original, it's a very emotional scene. You know, Shenron says, like, such a wish is well within my power. Bora's brought back to life. Upa hugs him. You know, it's an emotional scene. But in this version of events, once Goku asks Shenron to bring Bora back to life, Shenron unexpectedly responds with, such a wish is not within my power. Of course, Goku and Upa are immediately taken aback by this, just like, wait, what? You're supposed to be the wish-granting dragon. You can make any wish come true. And then Shenron would probably say some shit about, like, my power is only bound to the mortal realm. Sort of taking it to what Elder Kai would say about the Dragon Balls in the Buu Saga, how they're sort of defying the whole point of mortal life. And of course, this would be a very sad scene, because Upa would then realize that his dad is gone for good. So instead, I think Goku would then wish for all the damage that was caused by the Red Ribbon Army, you know, on the planet and to different towns and people to be fixed and undone. And ultimately, Goku and Upa would part ways for the time being. And now pretty much everything with the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai would go as in the original, but the next biggest death in the Dragon Ball series is, of course, when Tambourine kills Krillin. However, since the gang now knows that death pretty much is permanent in this world, I think Goku would get an even greater rage boost, you know, thanks to his Saiyan genes and all that. I know there's a thing here, I did sort of think about it, just like, should I have Goku actually go Super Saiyan in this moment? But that's already been a what if that Masako X has delved into, just like, what if Goku went Super Saiyan as a kid when Krillin first died? For the sake of the story, I'm gonna have it that that doesn't happen, but I will have it that Goku gets a slightly bigger boost in power, you know, thanks to the Saiyan rage boost than he did in the original, putting him around the power level of about 220. Of course, since Goku still hasn't eaten yet and he's very, you know, physically weakened, though there's a little more back and forth than in the original, Goku ultimately loses the first battle against Tambourine. But that does make his Zenkai boost even greater, putting him at about a power level of 265, which would allow him to probably destroy Tambourine a little faster than in the original. And with that, Krillin is avenged. I think Goku would have a little bit more of a pain in his heart though after killing Tambourine, just because it's like, yeah, Krillin's been avenged, but there's nothing we can do to bring him back. And pretty much everything else would be the same going forward when King Piccolo wishes on the Dragon Balls to restore his youth, and the moment when Master Roshi confronts him and attempts to use the Mafuba to seal him away. And ultimately that would go the same, with Master Roshi ultimately failing to seal away King Piccolo and dying. And this moment would be a lot more emotional, because to be fair, in the original, it was sort of pegged as like Master Roshi's last stand. Because I mean, even at the time, it's like Master Roshi was like, he's still very powerful at this point, like one of the strongest people on the planet. So this was meant to be like his last hurrah, and then it would hit even more as like a sad and tragic moment, especially for Tien, who witnesses it all. And especially Roshi's last line of being like, we will survive. Of course, also Chaozu would die in this moment as well, trying to stop King Piccolo from wishing. So this would give Tien even more resolve to go up against King Piccolo going into the finale of that arc, since, you know, both Roshi and Chaozu died and are gone for good this time. Pretty much though, the remainder of the King Piccolo arc would happen as per the original, with Goku showing up, fighting King Piccolo, that whole iconic scene. So jumping forward to the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai. Of course, big changes here because there's no Krillin, there's no Chaozu, there's no Master Roshi. Of course, Goku would still go and train under Kami, but in this version, instead of Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien all training together, it's just Yamcha and Tien. So I'd say their power would increase probably a little more than the original, since they're just focused on training one-on-one. And since going into the preliminary rounds, there's no Chaozu to fight the robotic mercenary Tao, it's more of a bigger reveal once they go into the finals of the tournament when Tien is reunited with mercenary Tao. And there isn't like that semblance of trying to avenge Chaozu, since that fight doesn't happen in this version. So I think Tien would be a little more hesitant to fight Tao, and a little more of like that fear of just like remembering how he used to look up to Tao when he was under Shen. But ultimately the fight would pretty much end the same. It would go a little longer than the original, but he eventually would do that gut punch to Tao, knocking him out. Another big change is that the Krillin versus Piccolo fight obviously doesn't happen because Krillin is not here. So I've tried to think about who would take Krillin's place in this version, but for the sake of audience interaction, feel free to insert whoever you want. Whoever was around during this time of the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai who participated in like the preliminary rounds, go ahead and insert them there. But the fight ultimately would end with Piccolo's victory. And pretty much the remainder of the tournament and the rest of OG Dragon Ball would go just like in the original. So how does this affect the next big chunk of the Dragon Ball series, going into Dragon Ball Z, the Saiyan Saga? So of course, one of the most iconic moments in all of Dragon Ball Z is the fact that Goku dies within the first couple episodes of Z. Now in this what if, since the Dragon Balls can't bring people back to life, there's a big thing here of just like, oh, so Goku's death against Raditz, that kind of would change a lot if it's permanent. So I'm sure you're probably thinking, oh, maybe there's like a workaround, like maybe Goku survives in this version. Nope. I will say, I think in this version, Goku would be a lot more hesitant with trying to sacrifice himself, because he knows that the Dragon Balls can't bring people back to life. I think he would be trying to plead and just trying to beg Raditz to just be like, hey, you're my brother, we shouldn't fight. Like, we can figure this out, you don't have to destroy the planet. But of course, Raditz being Raditz, he doesn't care. So I think the fight would go on a little bit longer. The moment of Goku catching Raditz's tail and still letting it go, I think would still happen. And I think it would be more justified in this version, just because, you know, Goku would be more along the lines of life being more precious. But ultimately, it would still end with Goku holding Raditz and getting special beam cannon by Piccolo. Of course, the death would be a lot more tragic in this version, and since Krillin's not around, instead of Krillin being the one to sort of hold Goku's hand in the end, it would be Yamcha. And it would sort of just be like this darkening moment, just because the Earth has lost its greatest defender. And I think this would motivate Piccolo to sort of switch sides, I guess, even more than in the original, and also him to train Gohan even harder than in the original, just because there's no guarantee that Goku will ever come back to life. So as far as Piccolo was concerned at the time, him and Gohan were the Earth's best chance against the Saiyans. Of course, everything with Goku in Otherworld, traveling to King Kai, all that happening would still happen same in the original. But again, in this version, since there's no Krillin or Chaozu, the only ones to go and train under Kami in anticipation for the Saiyans are Tien and Yamcha. But since in this version, it's only Tien and Yamcha who are training under Kami, I think their strengths would go up a lot more, since it would only be those two. You know, Kami's attention wouldn't have to be so divided against a bunch of different fighters. fighters. So instead of Yamcha and Tien being around the 1000 to 2000 range in terms of the power levels, I think Yamcha's power level would be closer to around 3000 and Tien's would be around like 3500. And since Piccolo and Gohan are training a lot harder than in the original, I think Piccolo would be about even with Nappa with the 4000 power level, and with Gohan just about edging it out with 1100. So then, going into the arrival of the Saiyans 1 year later. In this version, the concept of having the one-day pass granted by fortune teller Baba would still be a thing. So Goku obviously would see that as his one chance to return to Earth to fight the Saiyans. So that at least gave people pause knowing that Goku would return. But since in this version, Goku wouldn't have to travel all the way across Snake Way, Baba would just show up at King Kai's planet and then take him from there to Earth. Once Vegeta and Nappa arrive, Goku would already be there. Of course, everything with the Cybermen would probably still happen, but since in this version, Yamcha is a whole lot stronger than in the original, he's able to handle the Cybermen on his own. So, no Yamcha dying memes in this one. And with the Cybermen pretty much all taken care of, the Goku-Vegeta fight would pretty much happen immediately. And in the meantime, Gohan, Piccolo, Yamcha, and Tien would all take on Nappa. But since in this version, Piccolo is a lot more on par with Nappa, and everyone else obviously being a lot stronger, I'd say they'd be able to overwhelm Nappa and eventually defeat him. Probably a lot similar to how they ultimately defeated Raditz, except no sacrificing themselves. Of course, by this point, everyone would still be pretty winded and damaged. And just for the sake of an interesting twist in the story, Nappa would still punch off Tien's arm, but going into the Goku-Vegeta fight. Now, we do have to remember that Goku is dead during this fight, and because of what we know later in the Buu Saga, the body that you have in Otherworld is a lot more durable and is able to handle a lot more, case in point, Super Saiyan 3. So I think because of that, Goku is able to take a lot more damage from Vegeta and also be able to maintain the Kaioken times 3 for a lot longer than he is in the original. Of course, Vegeta would still turn into a great ape, and ultimately I think things would go about the same. Of course, though, Goku would have a lot more help with Piccolo, Gohan, and even Yamcha being there to help fight. Tien would pretty much be incapacitated for the rest of the fight because, you know, he's down an arm and still would be pretty winded. Ultimately, though, I would still give the honor of cutting off Vegeta's tail to Yajirobe, because why not? And since there's no Krillin for Goku to pass off the Spirit Bomb to, in this version, I'd say he passes it off to Yamcha. It would still go about the same, I would say, though Yamcha has a lot more experience throwing balls. I'd say his aim would be a lot more accurate than what Krillin's was. He would use the Spirit Bomb similarly to how he used Spirit Ball. Ultimately, though, Vegeta would still survive the Spirit Bomb. And once Gohan transforms into the Great Ape in that last moment, he's able to be calmed down a lot quicker because Piccolo is also there to sort of just be like, hey, Gohan, calm down. It's all okay. Everything pretty much goes as per normal with Vegeta escaping and everyone being left to recover. Alright, now we jump forward to the Namek Saga. This one's gonna be a pretty big chunk, so try to keep up. Of course, since Goku only has the one-day pass, he does have to return to Otherworld by the end of the day. Since in this version, obviously, the concept of Namek and the Namekians would still be brought up by Nappa and Vegeta, I think they would go down the rabbit hole an idea of just like, hey, since the Namekians are the ones who created the Dragon Balls, that maybe their Dragon Balls would be able to bring people back to life. Who knows? At this point, they're grasping at anything to maybe bring their friends back to life. They come up with the plan. It's just like, all right, once everyone's rested and recovered and the ship is ready, let's head to Namek. So at the end of the day, Goku would eventually return to Otherworld, but he would vow to be like, hey, whatever's gonna happen, I promise I'll find some way to maybe come back to life, because Goku at this point would just be so determined. But now this time, since Piccolo, Tien, and Yamcha are all still alive, the crew going to Namek would be Gohan, Piccolo, Tien, Yamcha, and Bulma. So the ship would be a bit more cramped than in the original, but ultimately, everything would happen as per normal. There's no fake Namek. We move on from that. I think in this version, there would be an interesting sort of conversation between Tien and Piccolo, because those two have never really had time to really sort of talk. I think Tien would, of course, like have a moment to be like, hey, just because like we're fighting together, that doesn't mean like I've forgiven you for everything you've done, even though it wasn't you, like, you know, everything with King Piccolo. Of course, Piccolo wouldn't give a shit. I think in this version, like Tien would eventually like put aside all that. I think they would have some interesting mental training between the two of them. They arrive on Namek, and in this version, Yamcha is in charge of protecting Bulma, which of course he self-appoints. And one thing I forgot to mention, since in this version Nappa punched off Tien's arm, he has a robot arm now, so why not? So instead of Gohan and Krillin going to the Namekian village and seeing Frieza and Dodoria and all that happening, it's Gohan, Tien, and Piccolo. And ultimately the same thing happens. Gohan rages out, he kicks Dodoria, and they save Dende. Vegeta arrives on Namek, all that happens as per normal. So once we head off to Guru, instead of Krillin being the one to meet Guru and take the Dragon Ball, it's Tien, and he has his potential unlocked. And since Tien is a lot more powerful than the original, I'd say a lot more powerful than what even Krillin was, I'd say Tien gets an even greater boost in power. But unlike Krillin, who's just happy-go-lucky and then just starts speeding off, forgetting the fact that people have scouters and can sense him, Tien would still be a lot more cautious. Of course, he would be like, yeah, this is awesome, I feel great. He would still be a lot more cautious and, wary of people with scouters. And then in this version, instead of Gohan going by himself to investigate the Namekian village, it's Gohan and Piccolo. And of course, all that happens per normal. They discover the Dragon Ball that Vegeta hid, and ultimately they are encountered by Vegeta. Only this time, Piccolo was there as well. So I think this would lead to a short fight between Piccolo and Vegeta, but ultimately Vegeta at this point, also being post-Zarbon Zenkai, would be a lot more powerful than Piccolo at this point, and it would ultimately end with Vegeta just knocking Piccolo out cold. And the same thing with Vegeta weirdly petting Gohan's head and then gut-checking him would happen as per the original. Then of course everything with Gohan going to Guru to have his potential unlocked would happen, though in this version it would be that Gohan is taking an unconscious Piccolo with him, hoping that maybe they can heal him. Of course, Tien stands outside to, ward off Vegeta because they can sense he's coming. And of course, the Ginyu Force arrives and that all happens pretty much the same. Of course, instead of it being the dream team of Gohan, Krillin, and Vegeta, it's Gohan, Tien, and Vegeta. The fight with Guldo happens pretty much the same, and then Vegeta's fight with Recoome and everyone else fighting Recoome would happen the same. Now, taking us back to King Kai's world, Goku, of course, is sort of just watching this with King Kai, just being like, things aren't going well. At this rate, Recoome and the Ginyu Force are gonna kill everybody. Now, this might be a stretch, but for the sake of the story, I think Goku would request to King Kai that he would increase the gravity on his planet. I know it's a thing of just like, does he actually have the power to do that? But I think he would. He's a Kai, why not? So I think Goku ultimately would go under the 100 times gravity training, but this time on King Kai's world. So ultimately, Goku would reach the power level of 90,000. I mean, also since the fact that he has, the more durable body, he can train the Kaioken a lot harder. Honestly, I'd say he'd be more around like 100,000 in terms of a power level. This entire time while Goku's training and King Kai's watching everything that's happening on Namek, he starts thinking to himself, if things go this way, Frieza gets immortality, like the universe is over. So I think King Kai would ultimately come to the same realization that Elder Kai would during the Buu Saga, that Goku is our only chance to save the universe. King Kai would pull Goku aside and be like, just sit down here for a moment. And then suddenly King Kai would fall over, almost like he passed out. And then suddenly Goku's halo would disappear. So in this version, King Kai, I think, would give his life to Goku for him to come back to life. Of course, much like with Elder Kai in the original, King Kai would then just spring up with a halo on his head and be like, alright, like, don't you dare put that to waste, alright? And now, I mentioned earlier that I would be taking concepts that would be introduced a lot later in the story and maybe pushing them further ahead, even if Goku was to return to Earth. Like, at this current moment, everyone's fighting the Ginyu Force, so even if Goku was to take the ship, he still wouldn't arrive for another couple days. Meaning that by the time he would arrive, everyone would be dead, Frieza would be immortal, and it would have all been for nothing. So I think King Kai would reach out to some of his contacts. One of those contacts being someone he knows can teleport anywhere in the universe at will, that being Supreme Kai. Of course, it's revealed in the Buu Saga that King Kai obviously knows about Supreme Kai, and of course the whole hierarchy of the Kais and the gods. So I think ultimately King Kai would reach out to Supreme Kai and be like, hey, I need you to take someone somewhere. Because you also gotta remember, during the Buu Saga, Supreme Kai mentions just like, yeah, everything with Frieza. Like, yeah, thank you for taking care of that. Like, Frieza was always such a pest. Of course, Supreme Kai would show up, Kibito would be with him, and there'd probably be some funny back and forth between King Kai and Kibito being like, the Supreme Kai is not some delivery service. Of course, Shin wouldn't care. He'd be like, it's alright. And ultimately, Goku would part ways with King Kai, saying that, like, he wouldn't put this life he's given him to waste. And Supreme Kai would ultimately Kai Goku right to Namek. Of course, just in time to save Gohan for being killed by Recoome. And of course, everything with Goku elbowing Recoome, knocking him out, him fighting Jason Berger would happen just like in the original. Though in this version, Supreme Kai, I think, would go back to King Kai's world and sort of question King Kai, be like, who is this guy? For the remainder of the saga, Supreme Kai would be on King Kai's world watching the Frieza saga. And of course, in this version, everything with Goku and Ginyu would happen, they swap bodies. Of course, instead of this version, instead of Gohan and Krillin going to Frieza's ship. It's Gohan and Tien, but we gotta remember Piccolo's still on this planet. We then would pick up back with Piccolo at Guru's tower. Piccolo would of course finally wake up and sense everything that's happening and the fact that Goku's here. Guru and Nail would inform Piccolo, be like, yeah, all this happened. And in this brief time, I think Piccolo would start asking questions to Guru, would be like, I was part of the evil half of a guy named Kami. We came from Namek. Do you know anything? And I think Guru would talk to Piccolo about like the history of him and Kami, because obviously Guru being as old as he is, he would know, you know, the son of Katas and all that. And then of course, right as Guru is about to be like, hey, I could maybe unlock your potential, young Namekian, Frieza would show up. And of course, that whole thing with Nail being like, I challenge you. Difference being in this version, instead of it just being Nail fighting Frieza, it's Nail and Piccolo fighting Frieza. Of course, the fight would pretty much go the same, except instead of just Nail getting his ass beat, it's also Piccolo getting his ass beat. And then of course, Frieza would realize everything that's happening, and then he would take off back to his ship. And then in this version, both of them would just be laying side by side like, dang, so this is the end, huh? Of course, now Nail and Piccolo both having a little bit more history with each other. He would quickly propose just like, hey, we have this fusion thing. Want to do it? Of course, in this version, instead of it being a random encounter that Piccolo just so happens to encounter Nail, it happens just like this, and it's more just so that they can both survive. Of course, unlike in the original where Krillin took the armor that was offered by Vegeta, Tien would not take it. We saw later in the Cell Saga, it's just like, I would never wear the same armor as Vegeta. Of course, Gohan would take it because he's Gohan. Of course, Goku's put in the healing chamber and everything pretty much happens per normal. Vegeta takes the nap that would forever haunt him for the rest of his life. And then we get to the moment where they summon Porunga. Everything is built to this moment, the whole reason they're here on Namek. Can the Namekian Dragon Balls bring people back to life? Of course, the first thing they ask is, can you bring everybody who's died from this point in time back to life? Everybody good who's died? And right as Dende finishes asking, Porunga responds with, such a wish is not within my power. However, the Dragon Balls do possess the ability to revive Namekians, because we're racist. Of course, this whole reveal just like stuns them. They're just like, then what the hell are we here for? So in this whole like mumbling, them being like, what the hell do we do? And then Vegeta shows up being like, grant me immortality and all this shit. And then of course, Dende's about to wish for that, and then Guru dies. In this version, they weren't even able to get one wish off. Because I think in this version, they'd be like, oh, then what do we wish for? Do we just wish ourselves off the planet? But then like Frieza, like, what are we gonna do? Of course, Frieza would arrive. He would fight Vegeta for a little bit, and then he would be like, hey, I have transformations. Second form, here we go. But since Piccolo is near, and he's fused with Nail a lot sooner, pretty much right after Frieza transforms into his second form, Piccolo would arrive. So no Krillin, or in this version Tien, getting impaled, no Gohan rage, unfortunately. So in this version of events, things are happening a little faster in the original, so pretty much the Piccolo versus second form Frieza fight would happen a lot sooner. And it would be even more of a shock as to how Piccolo got stronger, especially Frieza, who not even like 10 minutes ago just beat the absolute living shit out of Piccolo, and then he shows up and then they're fighting on par in his second form. So I think that would fluster Frieza a lot more than in the original. Of course, there isn't the scene though of like Piccolo taking off his weights and being like, oh, I've been holding back, because in this version he already has taken the weights off. So I'd say Piccolo is able to get a lot more damage in on Frieza a lot earlier, prompting him to go into his third form, and then, you know, everything with him shooting Piccolo would happen as per normal. Though in this version, once Gohan goes full rage mode and blasts Frieza, since Frieza didn't have that time earlier where Gohan raged out and started beating him up, he's caught more off guard by Gohan. And I think Gohan is able to do a lot more damage to Frieza. I think this would cause Frieza to just be like, wait, what the fuck? And then he would go into his final form more out of fear, I would say, than to flex. Though of course he would never admit that. Of course everything would happen as per normal. Frieza goes into his final form, kills Dende, fights Vegeta, Vegeta cries. But since things are happening faster than the original, there's still a lot more time before Goku is fully healed. Frieza of course has his moment where like he's about to kill Vegeta. I think Tien in this moment would have a Cell Saga moment a lot sooner, because I think Tien, unlike Krillin, is more prone to like spur the moment, we gotta do something. So I think right now he would have his Cell Saga moment of doing just a fuck ton of tri-beams to try and pin down Frieza. And I think ultimately it would still be the same. It would still affect Frieza a lot, because I mean, you gotta remember, like, the power gap between Tien and Semi-Perfect Cell back in the day was unfathomable, but yet Tien was still able to pin him down. So I think the power gap here would be similar, if not slightly less, especially with Frieza not going nearly all out, getting caught off guard by Tien. So I think it would still pin Frieza down, causing Tien's arm even to like self-destruct from the stress, then leading to him doing a one-armed tri-beam. Ultimately though, Tien would run out of gas and Frieza would start losing his sanity a lot faster. This is the first time we would see a pissed final form Frieza, and he then would shoot up and then just like deal a big hit to Tien, nearly killing him. And instead of Frieza about to kill Vegeta, Frieza's about to kill Tien, and that's when Goku would show up. I think Gohan and Piccolo would give a little bit of their energy to Tien just so he doesn't die. And then of course Vegeta gives his speech to Goku about, you're the Super Saiyan, you gotta defeat Frieza. Frieza's the one who destroyed our people. Of course in this version it'd be a lot sadder because Vegeta's not coming back to life. So like that whole speech about like, you're the last of the Saiyans, like you must defeat him. Because with Vegeta dying, it's like Goku's the last full-blooded Saiyan, other than Broly. But of course that would lead into the Goku-Frieza fight, which happens pretty much the same as the original. So we'd now jump forward to post-Spirit Bomb and all that. Frieza survives. Now here's the big moment, because obviously there's no Krillin in this version. So instead of Krillin being the one to be killed by Frieza, it's ultimately Tien. Now here's the thing. Would this affect Goku as much as it did Krillin? I think it would. Like, cause Tien's still a really good friend. Just Goku in that moment just being pushed so far past his limit, him being on the cusp of Super Saiyan, it would be the last push he needs, and Goku ultimately would still turn Super Saiyan. I think it would push him even more, because, you know, again, death is for keeps in this version. So we now jump forward to the end-ish of the arc, where, you know, Kami and Mr. Popo get their whole plan together, just like, alright, now we know that the Dragon Balls can only revive Namekians. Now before you say anything, just like, wait, how would Kami know that? Because King Kai would, that whole plan would happen. They would get the Earth Dragon Balls and be like, alright, let's see if this actually is true. Alright, Shenron, bring back all the Namekians that were killed by Frieza and his men. And Shenron would. So it pretty much shows just like the Dragon Balls are racist. They can only work on Namekians. Then of course Purunga's resummoned, though in this version, instead of them only having one wish, they still have 3. Of course, everything would happen like in the original with Goku being like, no, make the wish to wish everybody off Namek except Frieza and me. But since there's still 2 wishes left, Dende would then be like, alright, don't worry about the last 2 wishes, we'll summon you later. Though of course, in this version, Vegeta is not revived. So unfortunately, no Kakarot, you dog, you're a Super Saiyan scene. But since the last 2 wishes went unused, they don't have to wait nearly as long to summon Purunga again. And of course, the 2 wishes go to restoring Namek and then wishing the Namekians from Earth to Namek. Of course, they would still use the wish to be like, hey, bring Goku from wherever he is back to Earth. Of course, Goku would refuse that, and because he'd stay on Yardrat. In this version, I think I would have it that Gohan would wish himself to where Goku is. Of course, right as he says that, Chi-Chi would then explode to be like, no, you're not. Where the hell are you thinking? And of course, Purunga would be like, all right, done. And then Gohan would go to Yardrat with Goku. Of course, this would completely catch Goku off guard. So, of course, Goku wouldn't be mad. He'd just be like, all right, cool, training partner. So this is where things would get more interesting. Since now it's both Goku and Gohan on Yardrat, not only would Gohan learn instant transmission like Goku did, I think during this time, Gohan would turn Super Saiyan, because it's a year between Namek and when Mecha Frieza shows up, which is the same amount of time that they spend in the hyperbolic time chamber. So I think Goku would still have that moment when training Gohan, where he's just like, I think you're ready, here we go. But I think because of that, I don't think Goku and Gohan would have honed instant transmission as well as Goku did in the original, since they'd be focused on training Gohan. But it would still be a great leap than in the original, because now Gohan is a Super Saiyan at the start of the Android Saga instead of like the end. But now going into Mecha Frieza and King Cold arriving on Earth, instead of this version with it being a whole bunch of other people there, it's literally just Piccolo, Yamcha, and Bulma, because they're the only ones still alive. Which makes the scene of them being like, okay, the last line of defense against Frieza, it makes it a lot more stressful, because even though obviously Piccolo and Yamcha have been training in the time, it's like they would get washed if it weren't for Trunks showing up. Of course, in this version, I think it would be a lot more awkward, because once Trunks shows up, dispatches Frieza and King Cold, he would then be shocked to see it's just like, wait, okay, my mom's here, but where's my dad? Yeah, and then Trunks would be like, hey, where's Vegeta at? And then Piccolo would be like, Vegeta? He died on Namek. And then of course Trunks would be like, you didn't wish him back to life? No, the Dragon Balls can't do that. That would just lead to Trunks being like, oh god, did I make a miscalculation? Where the fuck did I end up? So I think for the sake of this what if, the timeline Trunks comes from will pretty much be the same as the original. Kind of has to be in order for him to exist. But you know, multiverse theory and all that, it's a bitch. So once Goku and Gohan arrive back on Earth, instead of Trunks being all secretive and explaining everything just to Goku, I think he would just be like, you know what, fuck it, I guess guess I'm not going to exist in this world. I'll just explain everything to everybody. Of course, Bulma would be caught off guard just with the fact it's just like, wait, I had a kid with Vegeta? In this version, you have to realize Yamcha and Bulma are a lot closer than the original just because, you know, one, there's no third factor of Vegeta, and two, they spent a lot of time close together on Namek because, you know, that was the whole Yamcha self-proclaimed job while they were there. All that would happen, Trunks would explain that in 3 years the androids would show up and that they need to train their life out. Here's the heart medicine, don't forget to take it. So in the 3 years following, I think Goku, Gohan, and Piccolo would train a lot harder than they did in the original. They're literally the last line of defense. The only line of defense. Yeah, there's Yamcha, but And also, since Gohan is a Super Saiyan, he's able to keep up with Goku. Because I'd say the two of them are more or less pretty similar in power by this point. I think this would also cause Piccolo to get an even greater increase of power, just because, like, he's training with 2 Super Saiyans now. Like, obviously, he wouldn't shoot crazy high, because obviously he's not a Saiyan, but, like, it would still be a significant increase. Everything would pretty much happen as the same, except in this version, the baby Trunks that Bulma has isn't Vegeta's kid. It's Yamcha. Unfortunately, no Saiyan Trunks. Pretty much everything would happen as the same. Yajirobe's ship would get shot down. Yamcha unfortunately gets impaled by Gero, and then the fight between Goku and 19 pretty much happens as per the original. Same thing would happen. Goku would forget to take the heart medicine. That would start kicking in. 19 would start taking his energy, but instead of Vegeta being the one to save him, since there's no Vegeta in this version, it would be Gohan who comes in and saves Goku. Now, this battle between Gohan and 19 would be an interesting one. It would be a lot less sadistic than Vegeta's battle against 19, because of course Gohan's fighting to protect the Earth, not out of selfish greed like Vegeta was. I think though it would ultimately end with Gohan still killing 19, just because by this point Gohan's accepted just like, if we don't stop evil here and now, who knows where that could go in the future. So it would be more of a mercy killing than Vegeta just being like, big bang attack. He would just give a big old Masenko and that would be that. Of course, everything with Gero going on the run, them going after them would happen as per the same, except again in this version, instead of it being Piccolo, Gohan, Tien, and Vegeta, it's just Piccolo and Gohan. This would still lead to the Piccolo-Gero fight happening as per the original, because I think Piccolo would still insist on fighting Gero one-on-one, just because of the whole him catching him off guard, and he'd be pissed about that. Of course, Bulma would arrive, Gero would take advantage of that and attack her ship, and of course Trunks would also arrive at the same time. Now, another big factor in this arc, since there's no Vegeta to be like, no, I'm gonna fight the androids on their own, let him release them, I'll take them on, I'm a Super Saiyan. Since there's none of that, pretty much it's a unanimous thing to be like, alright, let's go stop the androids. But of course, they would still arrive just barely in time. 17 and 18 would be released, 17 would kill Gero, that all would happen as per normal. They release 16, of course Trunks would have like, if they set that android free, it will be the end of all of us. And now going into the battle against 18. In this version, it would be Gohan, Trunks, and Piccolo pretty much all fighting 17 and 18 together. 16 obviously wouldn't engage because he only wants to fight Goku, but it would be a pretty cool parallel having Trunks and Gohan fighting 17 and 18 for obvious reasons. And then obviously instead of Vegeta getting his arm broken in this version, it would be Trunks. I was tempted to be like, yeah, Gohan gets his arm broken, but let's save that brutality. I think I would have it be a cool thing that maybe Trunks saves Gohan and then gets his arm broken in the process, you know, kind of a twist of fate in a way. They will all ultimately get bored though, same as the original, and then leave. But obviously since there's also no Krillin, there's no 18 kiss. Everything would happen the same. Piccolo would get pissed, he would go fly off, and then him and Kami would fuse, that all would happen. And then he would go fight Cell. Goku would finally wake up, and then the whole thing with like, yeah, the hyperbolic time chamber. Though this time he would take both Gohan and Trunks since they would be together, since Trunks wouldn't be off like trying to talk to Vegeta. And now here's where the next big alter of the story would be. Since there's no Vegeta, Vegeta and Trunks wouldn't go in before Goku and Gohan. Goku and Gohan would just go into the time chamber right away. Meanwhile, of course, everything with Piccolo fighting 17, Cell showing up, and then absorbing 17 would happen as per the original, though of course, there's no Tien this time to stop Cell. But there is a Trunks. He would fly down, and instead of doing a bunch of tri-beams like Tien did, he would just do a bunch of burning attacks. He would still yell at 18 and then to like, get out of here, you need to go. Of course, doing what Trunks is doing, it wouldn't drain him as much as what Tien did, but this would ultimately end with Trunks having to fight a semi-perfect Cell. But since obviously Trunks hasn't gone into the time chamber yet, he's still just a basic Super Saiyan, it's still not nearly enough for him to do any significant damage to Cell at this point. He would just have to resort to using solar flares and running, just having to buy time until Goku and Gohan are done. Now this would obviously be a very brutal fight because obviously Trunks is way outclassed. This would be very sadistic for Cell as well, just because, like, you know, his history with Trunks. He wouldn't be so quick to kill him. He would just be taking his time, just slowly beating the shit out of of him. Though everything would eventually lead to Goku and Gohan leaving the time chamber around the same time. Goku and Gohan obviously would still discover grades 2 and 3 Super Saiyan, but Goku would make the same realization of just like, yeah, this is a great increase of power, but it's slow as shit. So they would ultimately leap to grade 4, just like they did in the original. Because again, it's the same training that they had, just earlier now. I think they would still emerge a little sooner, just like in the original where they didn't use the full year. Just because I think Goku would sense at this point just like, yeah, we're good. And he would also like still see the initial thing of Gohan almost going Super Saiyan 2 and be like, yeah. And so, Goku and Gohan would arrive just in time to save Trunks' life. And of course, Cell would be completely caught off guard, just seeing both Goku and Gohan already in Super Saiyan. And also, he would sense just like, oh shit, they're strong as fuck now. And Goku would still take the initiative and start fighting Cell. And yeah, you could guess how that would go. Honestly, the fight wouldn't even really be that long, just because Goku would probably just be doing like Ultra Instinct type shit fighting him, just be like, is this it? This is Dr. Gero's greatest creation? And I think ultimately Goku would surrender the fight to Gohan still. I mean, not so much surrender, he would just be like, you want to have a go? And yeah, Gohan would then proceed to just beat the shit out of Cell for a little bit. There would be this part of Goku wondering, if he was in his perfect form, would this be more of a challenge? And of course, Cell would be the same thing, would just be like, if I was in my perfect form, you would have never stood a chance. But of course, since there's no Vegeta to feed that ego and lust for power, like Goku would still be curious, but I think Trunks and Gohan would both shoot that down, just being like, we can't let that happen, alright? So I think there would be a part of Goku that's still saddened, just like, huh, that probably would have been a good fight. Now, I know you're probably wondering, Cell probably would have maybe reverted to the point of maybe self-destructing, but I think the fight would be over before it ever really got to that point. But before we even got to that point, I forgot to include this, I would have it that Gohan would still deliver an insane gut kick to Cell, resulting in him regurgitating Android 17, meaning that Cell would revert from his semi-perfect form down to his imperfect form. So pretty much even if Cell wanted to self-destruct, it probably wouldn't have done that much damage. Yeah, at this point it's like, Cell, it's over, it's completely Jover. He would try his best to try and maybe absorb Gohan or try to reabsorb 17 and 18, but Gohan would just finish him off with a Kamehameha, and that would be the end of the Cell Saga. Of course, Trunks would have that moment of being like, alright, now let's destroy 17 and 18, but I think both Goku and even Gohan would be like, nah, like they didn't do that much. Like, yeah, they kind of beat you guys up, but like, I can sense good in them. And I think after everything 17, 18, and 16, you gotta remember he's still alive now. After everything they've been through, I think they'd be like, let's take life over death. So they'd take him back to Capsule Corp. You know, 17 would eventually wake up and be like, what the fuck has happened? And I think Trunks would still take his time in the time chamber, just because, you know, he has to head back to his time, and at this point, though he's a little bit stronger, it still wouldn't be enough to fight his versions of 17 and 18. So I think Trunks would still go in, and I think Piccolo would join him. But since Trunks now would have knowledge from Goku and Gohan to be like, hey, you're gonna discover grades 2 and 3, just skip those, focus on like mastering the Super Saiyan. When Trunks comes out of the time chamber, he would be even stronger, because he would be in Super Saiyan grade 4. So once he returns to his time and fights 17, 18, and Cell, it would be even more of a wash than it was in the original. So yeah, that pretty much is the end of the Cell Saga. Now going into the Buu Saga. Of course, biggest change going into this saga, Goku's still alive. Of course, Goten would still be born, and since Goku's still around, Gohan would be a lot more up on his training, and I think eventually they would still unlock Super Saiyan 2. Honestly, and I would even say during this time, Goku would still travel to Otherworld, because I think he would still be curious about like what else is out there. So he would still go there, he'd probably maybe still take part in the Otherworld tournament. Of course, he wouldn't be dead though. And I think Goku would get close to unlocking Super Saiyan 3, but since he's in a mortal body, he wouldn't quite get there yet. But also again, since Goku's still around, Gohan and Goten would be a lot stronger than the original. Since of course at this point, it's literally Goku and Gohan are the world's strongest fighters. Of course, Piccolo's still really strong as well. But yeah, everything with Great Saiyaman, Videl, that would still happen as per normal. Also, in this version, since 18's never met Krillin, she's pretty much just living her own life. I'd say she'd go down the route of working as like a fashion model or something. You know, she's always had that fascination with clothes and all that. But you know, she would also still train with like 17 and 16. But I think an interesting thing with this, since 17 and 18 are humanoid androids, and obviously shown in Super, they have the potential to get stronger. I don't think 16 could get much stronger than what he already is, just because he's completely just machine. Bulma and them could continuously upgrade him to get stronger and more durable. He doesn't have as much potential as 17 and 18, obviously. Either way, going into the 25th Tenkaichi Budokai, everything with the Junior Division would happen, except in this version, obviously, instead of Trunks being a Saiyan, he's only human. Of course, he would still be a pretty strong martial artist, leading to him, you know, being able to still sweep his side of the bracket bracket, leading of course to the finals of Goten versus Trunks, though of course in this version, Goten would win. But Goten wouldn't go Super Saiyan because why would he need to? It would still be a pretty decent fight, and Yamcha would be proud of his boy. Now, of course, going into the adult division, once Goku and everybody meet Supreme Kai, in this version, it would be a lot less of a surprise and wonder of who he is, because you gotta remember, Goku's already met Supreme Kai in this version. He was the whole reason he was able to get to Namek. So it would be more of a version of just like, hey, Supreme Kai, what are you doing here? And so I think Supreme Kai would inform everybody about what's happening a lot sooner than in the original. Of course, everything in the tournament would be a little different. Instead of Krillin being the one to fight Pintar, it's Android 17, which that fight pretty much would go the same. But then going into the fight between Piccolo and Supreme Kai, since he now knows who he is, I think it would be a little more of a fight than it was in the original. I'd say it'd be a fun, like, kind of sparring match, but I think Piccolo would still ultimately surrender just out of, like, respect for his station. And of course, everything with Spopovich and Videl would happen the same. Gohan would go Super Saiyan 2 against Kabito, but since he's a lot stronger, the energy that Yamu and Spopovich steal from him would be a lot more potent than in the original. They all pursue them. Kabito is unfortunately killed by Dabura, and instead of Piccolo and Krillin being turned to stone, it's Piccolo and 16. So in this version, it's Goku, Gohan, and 17 who go in to Babidi's ship. So instead of Vegeta fighting Pui Pui, it's Android 17, which the fight would pretty much be the same. Goku battles Yakon, that happens the same. And in this version, since Gohan is a lot stronger, he's able to defeat Dabura. So there's no like Majin possession thing. So ultimately, they would just go to where Babidi is, and since the meter on Boo's egg thing would be higher than in the original, instead of it being half, I'd say it's about like maybe 3/4, because again, Gohan's stronger. But since there's no Goku versus Majin Vegeta, the meter pretty much is just stuck there. Shin would just kill Babidi, just like he did Bibidi all those years ago, and Buu is stopped from hatching, and that's pretty much the end of the Buu Saga. Of course, there would also be the thing of Goku being like, I want to know how strong he was, but of course, Shin just would be like, no, just take my word for it, Goku, you would not be strong enough to defeat him. And so Shin would take the egg back to the world of the Kais, and Goku and Gohan, I think, would go with him just to, make sure that everything goes smoothly. Of course, once they go to the world of the Kais, I think Gohan would still see the Z-Sword and be like, hey, what's that? Supreme Kai would explain to him, and I think the whole stuff with the Z-Sword would happen as per normal, except of course there's no Kabito being like, you could never pull the sword, because unfortunately, Kabito is gone for good. How sad. Anyway, so yeah, Gohan would train with the Z-Sword for a little bit, and I think the same antics of it breaking and then getting the Elder Kai would happen as per normal. Though there's no rush, really, to have their potentials unlocked, because Buu is literally just over there in the egg still. Gohan would still have his potential unlocked, and of course, just seeing the immense power that Gohan has, I think also it would lead to Goku having his potential unlocked. So at the end of Z, we would have Ultimate Goku and Ultimate Gohan. That pretty much is the end of Dragon Ball Z, and we now go into Dragon Ball Super. Of course, Beerus will wake up, he goes to King Kai's planet, still having the premonition of the Super Saiyan God, but instead of this version, him fighting Super Saiyan 3 Goku, he fights Ultimate Goku. And I think this fight would lead to Goku being able to put up a little more of a fight against Beerus, since of course there's not like the energy drain from like Super Saiyan 3, and Ultimate Goku would be a lot more powerful than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. It would still ultimately end the same. And since there's no Vegeta to entertain Beerus while he's on Earth, it's up to Gohan and Piccolo to make sure that Beerus stays happy. So instead of the Vegeta Funtime Bingo, it's Gohan and Piccolo doing a duet of Funtime Bingo. But another big factor you have to remember, since there's no Fat Buu, Beerus gets his pudding. There's no real anger there. So that gives Goku a lot of time to arrive back on Earth. And since Beerus isn't pissed about anything, he's a little more patient with stuff. But a big thing with this that we have to realize is that since there's no Vegeta and Trunks isn't a Saiyan, the only Saiyans on the planet are Goku, Gohan, Goten, and Pan, who's inside of Videl. They're unable to perform the Super Saiyan God ritual, which leads to Beerus being like, that's a shame. I was hoping for a good fight. I think ultimately though what would happen is like right before Beerus is about to like destroy the planet, Shin would arrive and be like, hey, there's another way you could have a good fight. And Shin would take off his earrings and give them to Goku and Gohan. And I think this would lead to a funny thing with Whis being like, ooh, Potara fusion, interesting. And though Beerus would be like, I was hoping for a Super Saiyan God, I think Whis would assure him to be like, I'm sure this will be an interesting challenge for you. So ultimately, Goku and Gohan put on the earrings and we get Ultimate Gokan. And I think this would be a pretty good fight, because I think with those combined powers with the Potara fusion, I think would be able to give Beerus a run for his money pretty similarly to how Super Saiyan God Goku was. Though ultimately, I think the fight would end the same way. But instead of it just being Goku having to hold back Beerus's blast, it's a defused Goku and Gohan both holding back Beerus's blast. And I think in that moment we would see a quick flash of red hair from both Goku and Gohan as they negate the blast. And it would end the same way with Beerus being like, you know, there's other universes out there, I'm a god of destruction. And you know what, you two Saiyans, you've earned my respect a little bit. And now we pretty much skip Resurrection F because they can't bring people back with the Dragon Balls, so it just wouldn't happen. There could still be a thing of where Sorbet and them would go to Earth and be like, yes, bring Frieza back to life. And the Dragon would be like, I can't. And then the Pilaf gang can still wish for like their whole, yeah, give us a million Zenny, and then that. Sorbet and Frieza Force, they're still out there. So pretty much like the manga did, we just skip Resurrection F and go into the Tournament of Destroyers. So by this point, both Goku and Gohan will have trained with Whis. Now I know there's a thing where it's just like, wouldn't Gohan have still gone down the scholar path? You gotta remember, the Earth is very limited with warriors because of the whole permanent death thing. Gohan would be a lot more motivated to train and fight, especially since he realizes just like, other than my dad, I'm the only other person who can defend the Earth in the case of powerful warriors. Both Goku and Gohan would eventually go and train under Whis, unlocking Super Saiyan God and then eventually Super Saiyan Blue. And I even would say in this version, Gohan would unlock a different version of Blue, being able to combine sort of the powers of Ultimate with Blue. So before we get into the whole Kaioken thing, by this time in Super, Gohan's stronger than Goku. But you know, the whole thing with Champa showing up on Beerus's world, the whole concept of the tournament comes up, and then we go into the Universe 6 versus Universe 7 tournament. And since we have more than enough people who are around, there's no need for Monaka. So pretty much the tournament roster for Universe 7 would be Goku, Gohan, Piccolo, 17, and 18. So pretty much everything would happen the same. Goku fights Potamo, he fights Frost, gets poisoned, that whole thing happens. Piccolo then fights Frost, that happens the same, but instead of Vegeta being the one to be like, let me finish him, it would be Gohan. Because obviously Gohan would still have like that personal thing, just his history with Frieza. So, and though it wouldn't be as like sadistic as Vegeta's was, Gohan would still go over and quickly just knock Frost out. And then pretty much the same thing would happen with Vegeta as it did with Vegeta, but again, this time with Gohan. I wouldn't have that scene where Vegeta gets knocked out by Vegeta, because I would say at this point in time, Gohan is stronger than what Vegeta was at this point. Because I will include also that there was still the scene where Goku and Gohan went into the time chamber for another 3 years, and then leading to the Gohan Kaba fight. I think this would still lead to Kaba wanting Gohan to teach him how to go Super Saiyan, instead of in this version where Vegeta does his own sadistic way of teaching. It would be a nice mirror of a couple things. It would be a nice throwback to kind of how future Gohan trained Trunks, and also how Goku in the hyperbolic time chamber pushed Gohan to go Super Saiyan. Honestly, I think it would go that exact way where Gohan just charges a Kamehameha, Kaba would go Super Saiyan, and it would end the same way. But instead of Gohan being like Vegeta, who flashes Super Saiyan Blue and be like, hey, one day you could reach this, Gohan instead would be smart and just show him Super Saiyan 2. Your next goal should be to go after this form. And it would still end with the gut punch and yeah. But then going into Gohan versus Hit. I think Gohan would be able to last a little longer than Vegeta did, just because, you know, Gohan I think is a little more analytical than what Vegeta is. And also you gotta remember he's a bit stronger. But ultimately it would end the same way, just because like he had no concept of how to really keep up with the time skip. So ultimately Gohan is defeated. Next up would be Android 17. Now 17 would actually put up a fairly decent fight against Hit, just because, you know, Hit is unable to sense 17's energy because, you know, androids don't give off energy. 17 is able to abuse that for a little bit, but ultimately Hit would be able to counter it. 18 would pretty much be like, I forfeit. Like, if 17 couldn't beat him, there's no way I can, and I'm not even gonna bother. So it would just lead to Goku versus Hit, which happens pretty much exactly the same as the original. Only it would end differently. Because there's no Monaka, Goku wouldn't have that in his brain and be like, I want to see how he fights. Ultimately, the fight between Goku and Hit, I think, would end with a draw. Because since Goku would know that he has to end the fight fast because he knows he can't keep up Kaioken forever. Of course, Beerus and Champa would argue over who wins then, Zeno would show up, Tournament of Power would become a concept, and I think Champa would just flee in fear, and Beerus would just be like, alright, guess we win. Now here's where things get very interesting. Goku would question Whis, hey, so these Super Dragon Balls can grant literally any wish, doesn't matter what. Does that mean they can bring people back to life? And Whis would say, yeah, these Dragon Balls have no limits. Of course, this will lead to Goku, Gohan, and like everybody just being like, wait, really? And then Goku would go up to Beerus and be like, hey, so like we have a wish. But Beerus would quickly shoot that down, just be like, know your place, mortal. And I think this would cause like a little bit of tension between Beerus and Goku. Like for decades now, we've been trying to look for some way to bring our friends back to life, and like we finally have it, and like you're just gonna tell us no? But I think Beerus would reassure him at least a little bit, to be like, hey, these Dragon Balls reset in a year. In a year's time, sure, the wish can be yours if you want it. So that would give Goku some hope. But then we would go into the Goku Black arc. Pretty much everything would start out exactly the same. The big part where it would change is when Trunks come back to the past and has his sparring session with Vegeta. But of course, since Vegeta's not around, it's Gohan and Trunks who spar. Of course, in this version, instead of Vegeta giving that tough love, Trunks is getting to interact with a version of Gohan who's outlived like his version of Gohan he knew, and he's like, it's an adult Gohan as well, so just like the old days. You also gotta remember, in this version, Trunks would never learn the Final Flash or the Gallic Gun, because again, the Final Flash never happened, so he never witnessed it, and Vegeta wasn't here to teach him the Gallic Gun. So he pretty much would jump to when Goku and Gohan join Trunks to go to the future, and they have their first battle against Black. I think Gohan would still be insistent on fighting Black first, just because obviously Gohan is still really close to Trunks. And just, of course, seeing Trunks' future and, like, seeing all the refugees and everybody, he would, like, that anger in Gohan would start to awaken just to be like, I want to stop him. The battle between Gohan and Black, I think, would be a little more one-sided than the Vegeta-Black fight, initially, obviously, because obviously Gohan is stronger, a lot stronger than I'd say even Vegeta was at this point. So when it comes to Black going rosé, he does it more out of necessity rather than just to show off. Ultimately, though, it would still end the same way as it did with Vegeta, with Gohan being stabbed, and yeah. Then going back to the past, I think Gohan would be a lot more instrumental in discovering the mystery behind who Black and Zamasu are. Just because, of course, Gohan, he's smart, he's a scholar, like he's very book smart and all that shit, and just also just battle smart. And I think I'm gonna follow the manga path of things, where instead of them going back the second time and then doing nothing and then retreating again, obviously since there's no Master Roshi, Goku would learn the Mafuba from Piccolo. So then once we go back into the future, obviously we'd still have the standoff scene where both Goku and Gohan are standing off against Black and Zamasu, and of course Gowasu and Supreme Kai are there. And there would still be that scene like in the anime between Vegeta and Black where he's just like, I think I figured out the reason for how you're getting so strong. But instead of it being like, oh, watching us hurt your son made you angry, it would have been that, oh, watching us hurt your friend made you angry. So pretty much all that would still happen. We would still get Merge Zamasu. Of course, we'd also still get Rage Trunks, but yeah. But of course, instead of having the father-son Gallic Gun, we would get the master-student Masenko with Gohan and Trunks. Now, here's like an interesting little Easter egg thing. This version of Gohan would jump and then he would get hit in the arm. I wouldn't say like his arm gets blasted off, but like, you know, it's a reference to both, you know, future Gohan and also how Gohan saved Vegeta in the Cell Saga. Now, in this version, obviously, instead of Vegito Blue, we would get Gokhan Blue, which would be even more of a challenge for Merge Zamasu. It would still ultimately end the same way. They defuse, all that bullshit. And then we get Future Zeno, everything gets erased, blah, blah, blah. And then the farewell to Trunks at the end, I think would be a lot more emotional with Gohan saying goodbye to Trunks, just because I think he would end it with saying, I'm proud of you. Like, it's something that he never got to hear from Gohan. And even Vegeta. It would cause Trunks to weep uncontrollably. Me too, man. Alright, the Tournament of Power. Pretty much everything would happen the same. Goku would be training with Whis, Tournament of Power would come up, he'd talk to the Zenos, and then we'd go into the Zeno Expo. Since there's no Majin Buu, it would be Goku, Gohan, and I think Piccolo would join the team for this one. So the first battle would be between Piccolo and Basil. And honestly, I think it would be a fairly close fight. I think once, like, Basil eats the good stuff and becomes, like, roided out, it would ultimately lead to Piccolo having to, like, outsmart Basil to defeat him, and just sort of just outrunning the drug that he takes. And I think ultimately the victory would go to Piccolo, but he would be pretty winded and wounded after the fact. Then of course the Gohan Lavender fight would be not nearly as much of a fight as it was in the original, because of course Gohan is insanely strong in this version. He wouldn't even need to go Super Saiyan in this fight. Goku fights Bergamo, and then he fights Topo. That all happens as per normal. Now going into recruiting everybody. Of course, some of the first people he would go to would be 16, 17, and 18. Yamcha is also approached, but I think Piccolo would say a funny thing of just like, don't feel sad if we replace you with someone else. And then something interesting Goku would conjure up, be like, hey Shin, why don't we recruit Majin Buu? Then of course Shin would be like, what the fuck, no. But I think both Goku and Gohan reassure him, it's just like, we've grown so much more powerful in the last couple of years. Let's just see what happens. So I think they would release Buu, and of course it being Fat Buu, it ultimately wouldn't take much to bribe him. In case anything would happen, Beerus would be there and be like, I'll destroy you if you don't join the team. And then of course to fill another slot, Goku would be like, alright, let's take Goten. Of course Chi-Chi would be like, absolutely not. Eventually Goku would just like maybe instant transmission him away and just be like, we just gotta win. Pretty much all the slots are filled. except for one. We don't really have too many people to work with here. And then of course Beerus would like bring up the whole thing of just like, oh, if you didn't kill the Frieza Force, we would have a lot more people to work with. And then Goku's first thing is just like, oh yeah, Frieza. But then Goku comes up with a different idea. All right, I'm gonna head to Otherworld for a little bit. I'll be back. Now, since they're able to recruit people a lot faster in this version, I'd say they still have a solid day left until the tournament starts, instead of it being like a couple hours like in the original. Now, Goku travels to Otherworld, and the first place he goes to is Hell. Now, of course, you might be thinking like, oh, we're gonna recruit Frieza again, but no. He goes to Hell, and the person he goes to is Vegeta. Now, I'm sure it's the thing like, it'd probably make more sense to recruit Frieza, but I mean, you also gotta remember in this version, Golden Frieza never happened. So like, that's not really in Goku's mind. But with Vegeta, Goku is already conjuring up an idea. He goes to Vegeta. Of course, Vegeta's just caught off guard, just like Kakarot. Because you also gotta remember, when Vegeta died in this version, he was placing his everything, his pride, his faith, everything just in Goku to defeat Frieza. So it's like, when they left off, they were sort of on good terms. Goku would then explain everything about the multiple universes, the gods, the tournament, and of course this version of Vegeta coming from the Namek Saga, his whole world is turned upside down, just like, whoa, slow down. Also, I'm a Super Saiyan God, like, don't worry about that. Ultimately, he would go to Baba and be like, alright, I'm taking Vegeta for a day. He would also ask Baba just like, so, if I were to take someone who has the 1 day pass into the hyperbolic time chamber, would that count? Baba would then be like, yes, it would count. It's like, even though it's another dimension, it's still a day. So Vegeta would arrive and then be like, I was hoping we could like get in some training just to try to boost your power a bit. Oh, but it's a shame you're dead. This is where Whis would chime in and be like, what do you mean he's dead? Because, you know, we saw with Frieza, Whis can just bring people back to life. So then Goku would be like, ah, perfect. Hey, Elder Kai, come with me too. So then Goku would take Vegeta and Elder Kai and would go into the hyperbolic time chamber, and then Elder Kai would unlock Vegeta's potential. Now this is the point where you're really gonna have to bear with me, because we're gonna be speedrunning Vegeta's power quite a bit. I think also Whis would go into the chamber with them for a little bit too, just to help them just speedrun some training. So over the course of the next year in the time chamber, I think Vegeta would hit Super Saiyan fairly quickly, but it wouldn't really be much importance just because Vegeta would be at Ultimate Vegeta. I know there's a thing where it's just like, just because Elder Kai unlocks his potential doesn't mean like it's always Ultimate, and it also doesn't mean he's already at that level. It's a significant increase in power. I would still say it would put him above whatever his Super Saiyan 3 would be. And because Goku is training with God Ki, Vegeta is getting exposed to that a lot more. But ultimately the time for the tournament arrives, so unfortunately Vegeta is only able to get a little bit of a taste of that God Ki. So he's able to be at around where he was base form wise around the time of like Resurrection F. But unfortunately no God, no Blue. Of course during this time Vegeta is just like trying to catch up on everything. You also gotta remember this Vegeta has not gone through any of the emotional just stuff, like, cause you know his version of Trunks doesn't exist, he never married Bulma. There was no final explosion. So at this point, like, he's just going along with everything because, like, obviously there's so many people around him that could literally just kill him in an instant. So even though Vegeta would still have that mindset of just like, I will destroy you one day, Kakarot. Like, that would still be his motivation to train. But I think after everything that happened post Namek, he would be able to humble himself at least a little bit to just be like, all right, whatever, Kakarot, just if training under you is the only way I can get stronger, then fine. Ultimately, the time comes. So our team for the Tournament of Power is Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, Piccolo, Goten, 16, 17, 18, Yamcha, and Majin Buu. A very weird team when you look at it, especially since also the Vegeta is Namek Saga Vegeta. So which would be a cool thing, because he's wearing his Namek Saga outfit, which is a favorite of mine. Pretty much everything would happen the same going into the first little bit of the tournament. The trio of danger would attack Goku for revenge, and I think Vegeta would still jump in and fight, not necessarily alongside him, but, you know, Vegeta would have a little bit more of a struggle fighting all of them, just because, like, for one, it's been a while since he's been in a real deathmatch scenario. And also he's trying to get used to his powers and, you know, all that, and plus these opponents are a bit stronger than, say, the average opponent he was fighting in the Namek Saga. But I think ultimately it would still end with a final Kamehameha to defeat Universe 9. And then when 18 is fighting some of the Universe 4 warriors, when she almost gets knocked off, instead of Krillin catching her, it's 16, and they fight Majora. That all happens as per normal. Then when we jump forward to episode 100, Kaba approaches Gohan to fight him, and in this version, I'll have it that Kaba has already unlocked Super Saiyan 2. Since instead of just Vegeta showing him Super Saiyan Blue, a form that he never would achieve in such a short amount of time, since Gohan showed him Super Saiyan 2, he was able to get an idea of what he is able to strive for. And then Goku would fight Kale, and then since Goku's fighting Kale, I think Goten would jump in and try to fight alongside Goku. And that would ultimately lead to when Jiren decides to try and stop Kale, he would eliminate Goten in that moment. It would kind of be funny, but it's also just like, oh shit. Kinda got caught in the crossfire, buddy. And then leading to the whole Ribrianne thing, I think Vegeta would still have his fight against Ribrianne, and this would be like his first real fight against someone as a Super Saiyan. And I think it would be a little bit more of a struggle against her. Just, again, this Vegeta hasn't had nearly as much battle experience as the Vegeta we knew. Alright, but then going into the episode 105, in which Master Roshi fights all the Universe 4 warriors. Obviously, since there's no Master Roshi around, instead of him, it's a Yamcha episode, baby. And I think it would ultimately go about the same way. And then when he fights Genos, like, he still is getting his ass beat like Roshi did, but I think it would end, unlike Roshi's most powerful Kamehameha, it would end with Yamcha's most powerful Wolf Fang Fist. And then going into the episode where Frost tries to fight Vegeta, I think it would still happen that way, but there isn't any history between the two because Vegeta wasn't in the Universe 6 tournament in this version. So it pretty much would just be Vegeta beating the shit out of Frost, just because he sees him as Frieza. So that's his chance to sort of avenge himself from the Namek Saga. Instead of it being Master Roshi who tries to help Vegeta, it's Yamcha, but obviously there's no Mafuba. I think there would be a funny thing where Yamcha helps Vegeta eliminate both Vegeta and Frost in this version. Since of course you also got to remember there's no Frieza, so there's no that deal with him and Frost. Ultimately though, Yamcha would be out of gas and Vegeta would just be like, just go get a senzu bean before you die. And that would be Yamcha eliminated, putting up an amazing fight. And of course, like with what Frost tried to do with Frieza, he would be pissed and try to shoot Vegeta, but Zeno would erase him. That all would happen as per normal. Alright, and then going to the Goku Jiren fight, I think the Spirit Bomb would be a little bit stronger in this version, just because obviously Gohan would have a lot more power than he did in the original, and also with the android just being able to give infinite energy. Going to the episode in which Kaba fights Mana. Of course, in this version, I think Kaba would be able to handle Mana a lot easier just because he has Super Saiyan 2 already. Now, of course, you're like, oh, does that mean he goes Super Saiyan 3? Like, no, he just eliminates Mana. I think this would then lead to a fight between Gohan and Kaba. They would both go Super Saiyan 2, and it kind of be like how Goku was fighting Caulifla in Super Saiyan 2 earlier and also later. It'd be a fun back and forth, but ultimately, like, Kaba's no match for Gohan. And ultimately, Gohan would eliminate Kaba with, like, they'd do a quick beam struggle. It would kind of be reminiscent of Kamehameha versus Gallic Gun. And Gohan would eliminate Kaba. Kaba would have a smile on his face, just like, I did my best. And then when Goku is battling the Universe 2 warriors, instead of just 17 and 18 jumping in to help him, it's 16, 17, and 18 who jump in to help him. Which, of course, Jiro is just rolling in his grave, seeing that. Of course, there is another thing where it's just like when Gohan and Piccolo are fighting the Universe 6 Namekians, Gohan wouldn't be having nearly as tough a time. I think he would still be fighting them, like, out of respect still, so he would just pretty much stay in his ultimate form. He wouldn't, like, go blue or anything. Now, with the battle against the Universe 3 warriors with, like, Koichirator, the big, like, Gundam robot, instead of it being Gohan who fights them, it's Vegeta. Just because in this moment, Vegeta has a lot more to prove, I would say. It'd be like Vegeta going ultimate, he fights them, they fuse, they do all that stuff. And then Goku and Gohan jump in and, like, help him for a little bit. And then the whole Annulaza thing happens, 18 saves 17. So then going into the battle against Universe 11, it's pretty much 2v1s because Universe 7 still has 6 warriors left as opposed to 5. So the battles are still Goku and Vegeta fighting Jiren, 16 and 17 are fighting Toppo, and Gohan and Buu are fighting Dispo. Now, of course, everything with Vegeta getting super cocky, it would ultimately, though, end the same way. Honestly, Jiren probably wouldn't even need to block like he did in the anime. He would just still stand there, just because, you know, it's only Ultimate Vegeta as opposed to Blue Vegeta. Once we get to the point where Goku just goes all out Kaioken, instead of obviously Vegeta going Blue Evolution in this moment, I would have it be that this is the first time Vegeta goes Super Saiyan God. Of course, in this battle, it means nothing, because we literally saw earlier with Goku going God against Jiren, he could literally just... In this moment, I think it's enough to still sort of keep Jiren on the back foot for a little while. And Vegeta is just like barely able to keep up with Goku because of course Goku's in Blue Kaioken. It's enough that like their teamwork is so unpredictable that it's able to keep Jiren sort of just like on his toes. Now going into the Dispo battle, I think it would ultimately end with Buu wrapping himself around Dispo so he can't like run away. And instead of Gohan being the one to get blasted off while holding Jiren, he blasts both Dispo and Buu off the ring. And then going into the Toppo battle, it would still end with like Toppo being like sandwiched between two blasts of 16 and 17, leading to him going into his God of Destruction form. And then instead of Frieza getting brutalized, it's 16 who ends up getting eliminated by Toppo. I think 16 would try to do like an I have no other option moment, but Toppo would, you know, Hakai and then like get 16 out, so sad thing there. But this would then lead to Gohan battling Toppo. Now, of course, you're probably like, oh, does Gohan go Blue Evolution? I don't think so. I don't think that form suits Gohan, but I think what he will do is I'll take a little piece from the manga, and I think Gohan would go Mastered Blue against Toppo. And I think ultimately this battle would end similarly to how a recent Dragon Ball Super superhero would end, with Gohan doing a massive special beam cannon to Toppo's Hakai and defeating him. And then going into the final battle against Jiren, it's now Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, and 17 battling Jiren. 17 still does his sacrifice move, and Vegeta has his last stand moment against Jiren. Of course, not nearly as emotional as the original, because, you know, there's no Bulma, Bola, Trunks. Vegeta pretty much is just fighting purely for his own pride. And Jiren, I think, would still respect him for that, and I think this would ultimately lead to Vegeta doing a final explosion. Obviously not killing himself, but it wouldn't be enough, of course. It would still end with Jiren punching Vegeta, and Vegeta, I think, would still give his energy to Goku. But again, since Vegeta is not nearly as powerful, unlike in the original where it was enough to get Goku back on his feet and turn blue for a little bit, I'd say it's enough to get Goku back on his feet and then barely enough for him to turn Super Saiyan. And ultimately, it still ends with Goku going Ultra Instinct, that whole battle happens, and yeah. But instead of Frieza saving Goku at the last minute, it's Gohan, which then leads to a quick battle with Gohan and 17 fighting Jiren and holding him off for a little bit, and then Goku jumps in. It all ultimately ends with an amazing, never before seen in this version, father-son Kamehameha to defeat Jiren, and 17's the winner still. One thing I kind of forgot to mention is like a big motivation for this tournament is just like they can use the Super Dragon Balls to bring everybody back. So Goku would sort of look at 17 to be like, we could bring everybody back with this wish, but ultimately the wish I think would still be to bring all the other universes back, and Goku honestly would still respect 17 for making that wish, and that pretty much would be the end of the Tournament of Power. Now, going into the movies. The Broly movie. Now, since there's no Frieza, that's kind of a big factor in this movie, it's pretty much just Sorbet who's in charge of the Frieza Force. I think Chilai and Lemma would still discover Broly and Paragus, and through like talking to Sorbet, he would hear that like, oh, Vegeta's still alive, because you know, like Sorbet would keep tabs on Earth, and that would still motivate Paragus to be like, King Vegeta's son still lives. We must destroy him. And then we would jump forward with Vegeta, who's been training with Goku and Gohan. Now, the fight between Broly and Vegeta pretty much would happen the same for the most part. Obviously, Vegeta has less experience than in the original, but it ultimately would still end with like Vegeta turning Super Saiyan God, since now he has more control over that form, and trying to kill Broly. But since there's no Frieza to kill Paragus, in this version, I think Paragus would take this moment to try to attack and kill Vegeta, just being like, your father tried to kill my son, they took everything from me. And since obviously Vegeta doesn't have nearly as much patience for stuff as the original, I think it would just end with Vegeta doing a bang beam right to Paragus's heart. Broly then would see that still and then explode with rage, which would then lead to Gohan joining the fight, and the three of them are just like fighting for their lives. Then of course, instead of getting the Gallic Kamehameha, we get like a cool Masenko Gallic Kamehameha from the three of them. And then since Gohan is the least damaged by this point, he's just like, I'll hold off Broly, the two of you go get sensu beans or something, like find a way to win. This would then lead to Goku and Vegeta rendezvousing with Piccolo, and then in this version, since Goku's gone to Otherworld, he would have learned the Metamoran fusion dance, but this is the first time it would ever be brought up because the whole Buu Saga never happened, really. So this whole thing with Goku trying to fuse with Vegeta would happen. It would take a bit longer, obviously, because in this version, Vegeta's never even heard of the fusion dance before. Since Gohan isn't as damaged and is more powerful than Frieza would have been at this point, he's able to hold off Broly for a little bit longer. Then of course Whis eventually jumps in and has his little fight with Broly, and then we get the first ever appearance of Gogeta. That fight pretty much goes exactly the same. Gogeta wouldn't be as powerful as the Gogeta we see in Broly, but it would still ultimately edge out once we get to Gogeta Blue. And then Gogeta would like instant transmission in front of Sorbet and just be like, don't ever come to this planet ever again, alright? And then Sorbet would just be like, alright, cool, peace. And that pretty much is the Broly movie. Now when it comes to the manga, I haven't really like written out those chapters yet. I was mainly just doing the anime stuff. But I think more or less the Moro Saga and even the Granolah Saga would go the same. With the Moro Saga, it would still be Goku and Vegeta who go to Namek, because I think from this point on, like, it makes more sense that Gohan pretty much would stay on Earth, because it doesn't really make sense to have all three of them gone. Though in this version, I don't think Vegeta would save the Namekian child. It would be Goku who does it. Just because in this version, Vegeta wouldn't really have that regret of like killing the Namekians, because he's still just sort of just selfish Vegeta. He won't have that scene of just like, I did these people a disservice long ago. It would still lead though to Vegeta fighting Moro, Vegeta getting his ass beat, and then Goku getting his ass beat. Gohan is a lot more stronger, so the fight against 7-3 would be more one-sided. And even once Moro shows up, Goku, Gohan, all them fighting, Moro would have a little bit of a tougher time, but with like his youth and all that. And then with Vegeta, I think Vegeta would still go to Yardrat and learn like Force Spirit Fission and all that, and instant transmission. Of course, in this version, Vegeta barely has like understanding of blue. His battle with Moro would be more of an even fight, especially once he starts using Force Spirit Fission. The fight ultimately ends the same way, Master Ultra Instinct. And then Granolah, obviously this is a big thing we have to take in consideration. Pretty much everything would happen the same. I think Vegeta would still try to train with Beerus, because Gohan wouldn't want to be a destroyer. Like, he would still train with like Whis and stuff. He would pretty much try to continue to grow his ultimate form in his own way, which of course we'll eventually see the fruits of that training. I think Vegeta would still train with Beerus, but when it comes to like trying to learn that destruction energy, I feel like it would work better just because this Vegeta obviously would still be more sadistic. But going into the battle against Granolah, pretty much everything, Goku's fight with him would be the same, but then Vegeta's fight is where things would change a bit. Now, of course, there's the scene of him like talking about like, you know, the history of the Saiyans and all that. Of course, this Vegeta would not give a shit about Granolah and the Ceruleans. He'd just be like, yeah, they were wiped out like the vermin they were, which would lead to Granolah, of course, getting more pissed. I would say that in this moment, Vegeta maybe taps into a version of Ultra Instinct that's definitely weaker. Did I say Ultra Instinct? I meant Ultra Ego. Because he would still like kind of understand the whole destruction energy thing. I don't think he would last as long as he did in the original fight. And then of course Gas would show up and all that would happen. Now of course a different thing with this arc is that obviously there's not the looming threat of Frieza because he's dead. So the Heaters, like, they would still like kind of be working with like Sorbet and all that, but it would more be that the Heaters are more their own thing for the most part. I think Goku would maybe reach out and then Gohan would maybe sense like everything that's happening. So I think for a little bit, like Gohan would instant transmission to the planet, and then instead of getting that cool shot, obviously in the manga where we have Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct Goku powering up at the same time, I mean, it would still be cool because it would be Ultra Instinct Goku, Ultra Ego Vegeta, but obviously not as strong. And then an interesting thing with Gohan is we would see kind of like a beast omen in a way. It's like he kind of is like starting to get a handle on that energy through like training with Whis, who like I think would say to him just like, you have an interesting power within you. Maybe we can try and draw it out. So it's kind of like a beast omen where it's like his hair only kind of grows. You can see a little bit of the gray like in the blue in his hair. The battle with Gas would be a little more rough for Gas's sake. It would still ultimately end with Goku doing his Susanoo, but like once Goku throws him into space and Granola's about to shoot, but I think then Gohan would charge like an insanely powerful Kamehameha, and then like in addition to Granola's big blast would be enough to finish off Gas. And obviously since there's no Frieza, there's no Black Frieza. I think though, instead of obviously Frieza like going up and then killing Elec, I think Vegeta would then kill Elec. And Oil and Maki would just run off. And then yeah, that pretty much would be the manga. Now going into superhero. Pretty much the whole movie would start exactly the same as the original, except when Piccolo goes and meets up with Gohan, he's not pissed at him for not training, obviously, because Gohan's insanely powerful now. And then back on Beerus' planet, instead of Goku fighting Broly, it's Vegeta who's battling Broly. Instead of having that stupid scene of Goku being like, your body's gonna grow soft meditating like that, that's not training. I'm gonna say that Vegeta in this version is the one that says that to Goku, just because like obviously this Vegeta is a lot more arrogant and just focused on strength. Now jumping forward to when Gohan battles Gamma 1, Gohan has an immense advantage against him. Like, it's still really unclear. It's just like, how strong really were Gamma 1 and Gamma 2? It's just like, I know they kept saying just like, yeah, they're as strong as Goku and Vegeta. The way I interpreted that is like, they're as strong as Goku and Vegeta at blue. So in this version, I would say that it's still a decently close fight, but ultimately Gohan holds the advantage. Then of course the whole Cell Max thing happens, and then when 18 shows up, she also has 16 with her in tow. So it's kind of like a PTSD thing, seeing like, because Cell Max is in like the imperfect look. And then here, since there's no Krillin to tell Piccolo to be like, yeah, get big, I think Bulma would be the one to tell him, just because she's the only one here who was around to remember that he could do that. And then ultimately everything would happen the same. Gohan would go beast, except he'd be even stronger here, and ultimately Cell Max is destroyed. And so yeah, in terms of all the current canon material, that's what would happen if the Dragon Balls couldn't revive people. I will tack on a little thing at the end, because until we finally get something new, like a new manga chapter, a new movie, new anime, please, I'll tack on a little mini arc here just to sort of round out this whole story. Because since I've established that the Super Dragon Balls can bring people back to life, I think eventually there will be an arc in which everyone finally sets out to go and collect the Super Dragon Balls. And ultimately the wish will be made. Super Shenron, please bring back everybody with good hearts who has died since the fall of the Red Ribbon Army. And ultimately Super Shenron would grant that wish. Tien would be brought back to life, Chaozu would be brought back to life, Krillin would be brought back to life, and of course everyone else who's died, like, you know, the people like King Piccolo killed, everyone that Nappa killed, everyone that Frieza's killed, everyone that's cell absorbed that never got to be brought back. When they're looking through everybody, they're gonna realize something's just like, wait, where's Master Roshi? Honestly, I'm gonna have it that Roshi would be like, I'm okay with being dead. Because I mean, it's shown like in Dragon Ball, like when Goku refused to be brought back, it's like you can refuse wishes. I think it'd be okay for Roshi to just be like, nah, I'm good. I've lived my life. Fine with just chilling out with Gohan with some demon chicks. Now the weird thing would be is that when Krillin's brought back, he's still a kid. Because you gotta remember when he died, like he died at Tambourine and now we're post superhero. That's like what, 30, 40 years? I think eventually Krillin maybe would make a wish to be like, hey, can you make me like obviously he wouldn't wish to maybe be as old as like Goku and then he's just like, that's just throwing your youth away. He's kind of maybe open that like when he makes that wish, he'll be like as tall as Goku, but then he's not, and he's like, fuck. I think he would wish himself to at least be an adult. So like be like, yeah, make me like 20 or something. So probably eventually a lot later in the timeline, Krillin and 18 probably would still get together at some point. So yeah, ultimately, happy ending. Whew, this was long, man. I mean, I knew it would, because like after writing this, it's just like, this is fun. I like these what if ideas, man. One of my favorite channels is Masako X, who does a lot of what if Dragon Ball stuff. And just like thinking about it, it's just like, I've never really seen this as a concept that's really been covered. Of course, you can argue it's just like, oh, I took a lot of like the easy way outs and stuff and took a lot of liberties, but it's like, why not, man? Like, this is my first ever what if I've really written, you know? I had like that thing of just like wanting to kind of stay with the story, but I mean, writing it this way, it kind of makes sense. The two biggest leaps, I guess you could say, that I took were Gohan wishing himself to go to where Goku is on Yardrat, and then like Vegeta's leap in strength after being brought back to life. For the sake of the story, just let me add this, man. I think it's still fun. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this very lengthy, probably movie length episode of me just talking about this fun what if. I might cover different kind of what ifs in the future, who knows? This was kind of fun to write and talk about, so we'll see. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and stay tuned for many other videos, Dragon Ball related, and many other anime stuff to come in the future. So until next time, I'm Lancer. Thanks for watching.